I wrote an article on Facebook. It was too long because there's a limit how long it could be. So I kept adding and adding. So I split it into two parts. I'm gonna try and record it now. Um, it's about 41 pages. Uh, After I converted to regular typing. Um, the first page, I typed it just to see, just uh, in script to make it look fancy. Um, okay, just the first page. It's harder to read, but it looks a bit like a handwriting. I'm gonna I'm gonna record it now. I think it's mostly about Saint Anselm, who gave the ontological proof, and also Hartshorne, Charles Hartshorne, who wrote many commentaries on it in many articles and several books. Uh, okay, I'm gonna read it now. If 41 pages, it might take like 4 hours. I'm gonna try and read it fast. Usually I add commentary, but this time I'll try and read it just as it is mostly. Um, the first part is about 16 pages, and the second part is about 25 pages. It was, like as I said, it was recorded. It was typed in January, uh, two, 2024, last month. Today is February 4th, 2024. Uh, it's in the Sunday morning. Okay, I'm going to try and read this. I read it fast. Olivia Newton-John, who died about a year and a half ago, read her memoir very fast, about 7.5 hours, and she read it very fast. Not everybody can read fast. Some people are even dyslexic, even experts sometimes. Okay, I'm going to try and read this. Okay, so maybe you could use editing later. Okay, so uh, January 31st, 2024, part 1, page 1. This is, see also part 2. January 30, 2024, January 26, 2024, January 23rd, 2024, too long, so split. Part 1, Proofs of God, add. January 22nd, 2024, Can't See, Part 2, add. January 21st, 2024, The Philosopher Aristotle. January 16, 17, 2024, Medieval Age God, After Midnight. January 15, 2024, Love. January 12, 2024, Copleston, Russell. January 11, 2024, Anselm, Whitehead. January 10, 2024, Hartshorne. January 9, 2024, Habermas, Sociology or Religion. Okay, so um, January 9, 2024, Jürgen Habermas, German. Have I have Habermas's magnum opus, his book, The Theory of Communicative Action. I have Kant's critical philosophy, especially his magnum opus, The Critique of Pure Reason. Does Habermas do for sociology what Kant did for psychology? Question mark. Uh, though Kant also discussed ethics, which involved many people. In sociology, one discusses several interacting minds rather than only one mind. But maybe Hegel did it before Habermas? Question mark. Hegel has his book, The Science of Logic, and many other works. In engineering, you have standalone computers, but you also have computer networks. Kant created a theory of psychology. God may be part of it for him. We do not know. He was part of it. God was part of his ethical system. In his version of ethics, which includes free will, immortality of the soul, and the existence of God as postulates, as is it really a religion? Question mark. He argued that these postulates are possible Later, Hegel created a theory of or system of religion since it included God, maybe a rational religion, since he praised St. Anselm for his ontological proof of the existence of God. Despite Kant's critique of it, Hegel did, however, try to improve it, saying that it was a static proof, and Hegel made it a dynamic proof. Though after Hegel, a theory of religion was created without God, so maybe it was no longer religion but became sociology, ? The fathers of modern sociology are Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. Later came Habermas, etc. Page 2. Definition ? Religion is sociology plus God. Later they added to religion the philosophy of Aristotle or Plato. For someone who saw a masterpiece on religion of Maimonides, Averroes, or Aquinas, etc., of medieval age, it may be very boring to see modern works on sociology. They have no God nor a philosophical basis like Aristotle or Plato, nor the modern philosophy of Kant. In the second half of the 20th century, Gene Roddenberry created the famous world of Star Trek. It is founded upon science and engineering. It is a kind of religion, since it uses symbolism and have beings superior and inferior to us. They are called aliens, rather than the traditional terms of angels, demons, and gods. It is still popular, expanding in scope today. Before, they used to think that the heavens and the earth were different. It's Newton who unified it for gravity, at least anyway, and mass. Charles Hartshorne published a book called Philosophers Speak of God in 1953. It includes many sections of great philosophers with many selections of great philosophers with proofs of the existence of God from the last 2,500 years. But I just found out, surprisingly, that he also published a book called Anselm's Discovery in 1965, a whole book devoted to the ontological proof of God of Anselm. Really Kant argued that all the proofs of God failed, since there are three main ways of proceeding, but they all include the ontological proof. Kant considered his greatest achievements to be 1. Showing the a priori nature of space and time. Really, I think that Einstein may have found a way to define them a posteriori later. After he created his successful theory of special and general relativity, and he created his successful theory of special and general relativity. 2. The possible breakdown of the law of causality. He was inspired by Hume. Though Einstein was not convinced that free will was possible, Born said it is a philosophical, not a scientific question, and recommended a book by the new Kantian philosopher called Cassirer. He was taught by Hermann Cohen of Neo-Kantianism. But Maimonides said that the number one principle of religion is the existence of God, though he would agree with Kant that free will is also essential. So Kant's critique of all the proofs of the existence of God may really be his greatest achievement, despite what he said, though perhaps a negative one. And so Hartshorne's 1965 book on Anselm, 200 years after Kant, may really be a very important critique of Kant's philosophy, since Hegel wrote a praise of that proof and revised it, but I do not think that he wrote a whole book on it, and Kant said that all proofs of God reduce to it. I have also listed over 1,000 proofs of the existence of God. That may be my greatest work. If they all reduce to the ontological proof, as Kant claims, then Hartshorne's discussion of Anselm may be invaluable for theology and for my proofs. He is also part of the prestigious Library of Living Philosophers, volume 20. The Philosophy of Charles Hartshorne, copyright 1991. But I don't know why they waited till he was 94 years old to add him to the list. January 10, 2024. If you have God in the world or related to it, then it is a completely different world. You can ask if the world is perfect, has a meaning or a purpose, and if it is eternal, arose by chance, or it was created. There will be miracles, providence, and possibly prophecy. God will ensure we go to paradise after our life journey and make it as great as possible. Free will would be necessary. Life would be hard, but worth it to earn paradise. According to Louis Edwin Hahn, 1990, editor of Volume 20 of the Library of Living Philosophers, it is fitting it should be devoted to the philosophy of Charles Hartshorne, 1991. He was a critic in 8 earlier volumes. More than any other philosopher, he is internationally known for his contributions to philosophy of creativity and for his brand of process, philosophy, and theology. For 60 years, Hartshorne defended his theses. He compared them with those of Plato, Aristotle, Democritus, and ancient Buddhism through Epicurus, Anselm, Socinus, Leibniz, Hume, and Kant, to Emerson, Brooks, and James Pierce, Dewey, Royce, W. E. Hawking, Whitehead, Searle, Merleau-Ponty, Heidegger, Heyer, and Popper. He claims that they may have made positive contributions and also mistakes, so they should be defended in some cases and the errors shown in other cases. In his psychoanalytic process philosophy, he distinguishes sharply between 1. A priori metaphysics and 2. Empirical cosmology. The former here 1 seeks necessary positive general truths about existence which are not falsifiable by any conceivable observations. The latter, here 1 seeks to develop a worldview which combines the abstract and the concrete, the logic and the actual. Central to Hartshorne's outlook are new interpretations of notions like God, feeling and feeling of feeling, freedom, chance, creativity, the primacy of aesthetic meaning or affective tone, the social character of experience, sympathy or self-creative, sympathy as self-creative, the unity of life and the ecological approach to the world, inclusive polar contrast, doctrinal matrices, relatedness and asymmetry, and generalized causal possibility with a place for probabilities and open possibilities. Volume 20. Volume 20 helps spell out Hartshorne's views. January 11, 2024. Charles Hartshorne is an American. He lived from 1897 to 2000, so the whole 20th century. His books include the books The Philosophy and Psychology of Perception in 1934. Also, the book Beyond Humanism, Essays in the New Philosophy of Nature, 1937. The book Man's Vision of God and the Logic of Theism. The book The Divine Relativity, a Social Conception of God, 1948. And the book Reality, a Social Process, Studies in Metaphysics in Religion, 1953. The book The Logic of Perfection and Other Essays in Neoclassical Metaphysics, 1962. The book A Natural Theology for Our Time, 1967. The book Creative Synthesis and Philosophical Method, 1970. The book Insights and Oversights of Great Thinkers and Evaluation of Western Philosophy, 1983, etc. Lower, um, Hartshorne and Johnson wrote the book Whitehead and the Modern World, Science, Metaphysics, and Civilization, 3 essays on the thought of Alfred North Whitehead, 1950. The one by Hartshorne was called Whitehead's Metaphysics. Hartshorne also wrote the book on Whitehead's philosophy, Selected Essays, 1935 to 1970, in 1972, and also the book Aquinas to Whitehead, 7 Centuries of Metaphysics of Religion, and the Aquinas Lecture, 1976. Hartshorne also wrote countless articles and reviews, etc. Oh God! Exclamation mark. Does he make a powerful challenge to Kant's attack of the importance of the science of metaphysics? Question mark. Number 1. He concentrated primarily on the philosophy of religion and on metaphysics. Number 2. He developed the neoclassical idea of God. Number 3. He produced a modal proof of the existence of God that was a development of Anselm's ontological argument. Number 4. He developed Whitehead's process philosophy into process theology. It seems he never married nor had children, even though he lived 103 years, perhaps the oldest of all great philosophers. Alfred North Whitehead, English. He lived 1861 to 1947. An English philosopher, mathematician, and prolific author, he was one of the most influential scholars of his age. He created the philosophical school known as process philosophy. It has been applied to a wide variety of disciplines, including theology, education, physics, biology, psychology, and economics. His main interests were metaphysics and mathematics. Hartshorne, Quine, and Russell, etc., were his doctoral students. The book called Process and Reality was his magnum opus. It is based on his 1927-1928 lectures. It is one of the major philosophical works of the modern age. He wrote the 3-volume Principia Mathematica with his former student Bertrand Russell, 1910 to 1913. It is one of the most important works on mathematical logic of the 20th century. Whitehead gradually turned to philosophy of science and finally to metaphysics, and he developed a metaphysical system radically different from most of modern philosophy. He argued that reality consists of processes rather than material objects, and that processes are best defined by their relationship to other processes, thus rejecting the theory that reality is constructed out of pieces of matter that exist independently of each other. His philosophical works are the foundation of process philosophy, especially his book called Process and Reality. Whitehead held it was very important to see the world as a web of interrelated processes of which we are a part, so that all our choices and actions have consequences for the world around us. My critique of Whitehead: didn't Hegel, living in the 19th century, already see things as dynamic or in transition, though he was influenced by Spinoza and saw everything as existing in God's substance or the absolute? And didn't Einstein propose the general theory of relativity and later a unified field theory early in the 20th century, joining the fields of gravity and electromagnetism, a theory where you have waves, not objects? Today's superstring theory is popular as an attempt to unify all of physics. Really, did they just replace the term wave of Einstein used by the term string, superstring, or membrane for higher dimensions? January 22nd, 2024. January 12th, 2024. January 11, 2024. Saint Anselm, Italian. He lived 1033 to 1109. Oh God! Exclamation mark. I just checked the book by Saint Anselm's Basic Writings, second edition, 1962, since it has translations of works where the ontological proof was first given. Surprisingly, it also comes with several selections by other prestigious philosophers also. The second edition has two introductions. Charles Hartshorne, 1897 to 2000, Process Theology. He included selections from St. Anselm and a commentary on them in his book The Philosophers Speak of God, 1953, and the second edition, First Introduction to Anselm by Charles Hartshorne in 1962. He also wrote a chapter called What Did Anselm Discover? In his book Insights and Oversights of Great Thinkers in 1983, he wrote a whole book called Anselm's Discovery, 1964. It is probably very important. Check it. Hubertus C. Hübbeling wrote a chapter called Hartshorne and the Ontological Argument in the book The Philosophy of Charles Hartshorne, The Library of Living Philosophers, Volume 20, copyright 1991, and Hartshorne replied there. He seems to be an expert on the ontological argument. And add notes. Alfred Weber, 1868 to 1958. It also includes a translation of an expert from Alfred Weber's History of Philosophy, 5th French edition, 1892. It describes Anselm's position in the world of thought. Gonilo, 1994 to 1083, empiricist, a French monk who wrote a critique called On Behalf of the Fool, and Anselm replied to it. And it includes a section of critical readings of Anselm's ontological argument for the existence of God, all from the modern age. I have to read Anselm's book, these readings, and Hartshorne's articles and book on Anselm. January 16, 2024, January 15, 2024, January 12, 2024. Islam. Ayad, medieval age, Islam. Averroes lived 1216 to 1198. The commentator on Aristotle. He gave several proofs of the existence of God from religion and philosophy. I think he did not include the ontological argument. Averroes says that there are two proofs from Muhammad, the founder of Islam. One argument is from providence or providing for man, and one argument is from invention or the invention of life in inanimate matter, etc. Though at times these two types of reasoning are combined in the Quran. Averroes criticized the proofs of God given by the Aristotelians Farabi and Avicenna. They were attacked by Al-Ghazali, and Averroes also criticizes him. Besides his many short, medium, and long commentaries on Aristotle's books, Averroes also wrote The Incoherence of the Incoherence, etc., which is a book which criticizes Ghazali. There is one proof of the necessary existence by Farabi or Avicenna, not mentioned by Kant. It considers three cases of whether all, some, or no things are corruptible. That means that they can change in substance. And concludes that there must be some things that are incorruptible. Judaism, Maimonides, 1135 to 1204. Judaism, the rabbi. I think he listed many proofs of the existence of God based on religion and philosophy, but he did not accept the ontological argument. He tried to give a cosmological proof of the prime mover and of the necessary existence. Maimonides mentions the proof by Abraham, which is a proof from motion. The planets and stars are ultimately moved by God, like an axe in the hands of axemen, a bit like Aristotle's mover of the prime mover, a bit like Aristotle's proof of the prime mover, and Maimonides' own prime mover proof. The modern law of inertia affects this proof, perhaps originated by Galileo, added to mechanics by Newton, revised by Einstein in general relativity, and I also revised it. Maimonides also mentions the proof given by Moses, the founder of Judaism in the Bible, which is a proof of God via a necessary existence. Hebrew Heye, Asher Heye, was used to define God. He also argues that if creation was proven, then it would prove that God exists and all the miracles are also possible. Creation is common to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It is Kant's first antinomy. Many things we do today, our ancestors would have called miracles 2,000 years ago, or even 100 years ago. Maimonides says that the prime mover and the necessary existence cannot be the same being. Maybe since he argued that both are causally related to the world, but as different types of causes, the former as end cause and the latter as efficient cause. Aristotle had six types of causes and reduced them to 4 types of causes. Okay, page 8. Besides writing his commentary on the Mishnah, the Book of Commandments, and the Mishnah Torah, Maimonides wrote his famous philosophical work, The Guide of the Perplexed. His guide includes a short commentary on Aristotle's physics and metaphysics. The Bible of Moses also is meant as a proof of God's existence, since it says that the nations of the world will hear the commandments that God gave the Jews and say that this is a wise and understanding nation. Maimonides lists the commandments in the books called the Commandments and in the Mishnah Torah, and he analyzes the purpose of the different classes of commandments in his guide. He also wrote several books on medicine. Christianity, St. Thomas Aquinas, 1225 to 1274, Thomism. He also criticized the ontological argument and is not listed in his famous 5 ways of proving the existence of God. He was influenced by Plato, Aristotle, Averroes, Maimonides, and others. He held that the existence of God was demonstrated, and so those who did not believe should be punished. According to Aquinas, demonstration can be achieved in 2 ways. 1, by first giving the definition of the being. 2, from effects of the being. But we cannot define God. Maybe this is why he rejected the ontological proof, so we must start from the effects of God, hence we use cosmological proofs. Aquinas probably accepted Aristotle's logic, syllogisms, etc., like many people did in the analytics, prior and posterior analytics. Aquinas also argued that the necessary existence has necessity of existence and hence must have the full power of being and thus be perfect. So it is God. But like Maimonides, he used the cosmological argument and that the necessary being exists. He did not argue that the necessary existence must exist, since existence is necessary attribute of it. But both Aristotle and Kant argue that an infinite series in time is possible. It is only possible outside of time. It is only not possible outside of time, as in a logical argument. I think he included proofs of God from the Bible by Jesus, the founder of Christianity, namely that Jesus claimed to have seen God, so he is a witness, and that he was killed yet rose from the dead a few days later, and witnesses spoke to him. Besides his famous books, the Summa Theologica for Christians and the Summa Contra Gentiles for non-Christians, St. Thomas Aquinas wrote many other books, including even several commentaries on Aristotle, who was called a philosopher. My note, this is page 9. My note, some philosophers may reject the ontological proof of God, but accept an empirical proof. Even Kant said that the design argument way of proving God, the theological argument, exists, proving God exists, should be held with respect. Though really said it could be just proved that an architect or that a God that no longer exists. So far, about 31 minutes. January 11, 2024, Modern Age. Number 1, Descartes, 1596 to 1650, rationalist. René Descartes chose one or two versions of the ontological argument in the Meditations on First Philosophy. He used both of them, according to Hartshorne. Number 2, Spinoza, 1632-1677, rationalist. Really, Spinoza used the ontological argument in his Ethics. Number 3, Locke, 1632-1704, empiricist. He also gave a proof of God, an essay concerning human understanding. Number 4, Leibniz, 1646-1716, rationalist. New essays concerning human understanding. He used the ontological argument. Number 5, Kant, 1724-1804, critical idealism. Really, he lists several versions of the ontological argument, holding that it involves linking the ons realissimum to the necessary existence. In his critique of pure reason, he even tried to give empirical proofs of God. Really, Kant gave the most famous critique of all proofs of God. Number 6, Hegel, 1770-1831, absolute idealism. Lectures on the History of Philosophy, Volume 3. Really, Hegel criticized but also praised St. Anselm. He criticized Kant and offered what he saw as an improved version of the ontological argument. See his lectures on the philosophy of religion also. Showing God exists involves a movement towards God. It is dynamic, not static. Number 7, J.A. Dorner, 1809-1884, A System of Christian Doctrine. Number 8, Lotz, 1827-1881, Microcosmos. Number 9, Robert Flint, 1838-1910, Theism. Add note. Well, in the introduction to the ontology by Hartshorne, he discusses these more, plus in his other book, January 12, 2024, Bertrand Russell is English, 1872 to 1970, another long life. Bertrand Russell said in the History of Western Philosophy, copyright 1945, that Anselm and Roscelin were the most important philosophers in the 11th century. St. Anselm was a monk, the Archbishop of Canterbury. His main claim to fame is being the inventor of the ontological argument for the existence of God. It begins by defining God as the greatest possible object of thought. So page 10 now. Russell says that the argument was never accepted by theologians. Aquinas rejected it and his authority prevailed. Among philosophers, Descartes revised it. Leibniz argued that the ontological proof could be made valid if one adds that God is possible. Kant claimed he demolished the proof, but it underlies Hegel's system. Bradley mentioned it using the principle, what may be and must be is. Russell holds that the argument must be treated with respect. Whether it is valid or not has a distinguished history. The real question is a generalized one. Is there anything we can think of that can be shown a priori to exist outside our thoughts? That is the real goal of philosophy. Plato used a kind of ontological argument to prove that the objective reality of ideas, but St. Anselm is the first one to state the argument in its logical purity. Maybe Russell means it to prove God exists. St. Anselm was influenced by St. Augustine in theology. Russell says that Anselm derived another proof of the existence of God by using the Platonic ideas. He even claims to prove the Trinity using Neoplatonic arguments. Anselm, St. Augustine, and John de Scott considered reason subordinate to faith. The common origin is Plato. Knowledge of Plato and Aristotle was fragmentary till later in the medieval age, so their image was inaccurate. Coppelson believed that Anselm deserves a place in the history of philosophy since, besides his dogmatic theology, he did work in natural theology or metaphysics. He gave arguments for the existence of God. The first truth is God's existence, and that the Thomists will hold that it is demonstrable by human reasoning. For Christians, there is a second truth, the Trinity. Anselm develops the proof of God's existence from degrees of perfection which are found in creatures in his Monologium. The argument proceeds from empirical observation and is therefore a posteriori. But judgment implies a reference to a standard of perfection. This argument is Platonic in character. Aristotle also argued early in his career, but arguing early in his career that where there is better, there must be the best, and Aquinas used it. Page 11. Anselm gives another argument there. Whatever exists either through something or through nothing. It is an argument from causality, but a Platonic element is added. The implication being that when several beings possess the same form, there must be a unitary being external to them, which is that form. As to attributes, we can predicate of it only those qualities which to possess is absolutely better than not to possess. We must predicate wisdom, life, justice of the Supreme Being, and he possesses his attributes through his own essence, and the divine essence is simple. He must transcend space since he is simple, and transcend time since he is eternal. He is a substance but refer to his essence, but not the category of substance, since he is incapable of change or sustaining accidents. St. Anselm also gives reasons for the Trinity of persons in his book. That is theology, but we see already he made a real contribution to natural theology. He gives a posteriori arguments for the existence of God, which are much more systematic than those of Augustine. He also applied dialectic to dogma, so it is an error to associate his name only with the ontological argument. Copleston says that Anselm must be acknowledged as one of the main contributors to scholastic philosophy on theology. In the next book, called Proslogium, he develops the ontological argument, which proceeds from the idea of God. The arguments of the monologium were complex, so he tried to create an argument which would be sufficient by itself to prove all that we believe about the divine substance, and thus reduce the previous arguments and their complementary arguments to one argument. Copleston lists the argument in syllogistic form, unlike Anselm, as follows. God is that than which no greater can be sought, but that than which no greater can be sought must exist, not only mentally in idea, but also extramentally in the world. Therefore, God exists not only in idea, mentally, but also extramentally in the world. I don't know if that's the first version of the proof. It starts with the idea of God as absolutely perfect. Anselm argues that no one can have the idea of God and yet deny his existence. So only a fool would say that there is no God. The absolutely perfect being is a being which is necessary, which necessarily involves existence. This is page 12. The attributes of God are contained implicitly in the conclusion of the argument. God must be omnipotent, omniscient, supremely just, etc. The monk Gonilo, which is a real person, attacked the argument given in the Proslogion. He claimed that the idea we have of a thing is no guarantee of its extramental existence, an unjustified transition from the logical to the real order. Gonilo argued that in a similar way, we could say that the most beautiful islands which are possible must exist somewhere because we can conceive them. But if the idea of God is the idea of an all-perfect being which involves existence, this idea is an idea of an existence, whereas the idea of even the most beautiful island is not the idea of something which must exist. The two ideas are different. If God is possible, that is, it contains no contradiction, then God must exist, since it would be absurd to speak of a merely possible necessary being. But there is no contradiction in speaking of a merely possible beautiful island. My critique of Gonilo and St. Anselm. You can start with the idea of a beautiful island, nothing greater than which can be conceived, similar to the idea of God. But to exist in reality is greater than this, so it must exist. Ironically, this is even better than it looks. You prove the existence of paradise, or the perfect world. It includes angels and God. Copleston says the main objection to St. Anselm's proof is that we do not know a priori that the idea of God, the idea of an infinite and absolutely perfect, of an absolute perfection, is a possible being. It was an objection Descartes which Leibniz tried, an objection to Descartes, which Leibniz tried to resolve. My reply, really, do not confuse the absolute perfect and supremely perfect. Do not confuse the absolutely perfect and the supreme being. Spinoza and Kant define God as an extreme with infinite attributes of infinite magnitude. God can be defined in many ways. In the medieval age, philosophers defined God as having one simple essence. It was an intellectual being, namely, it was the intellectual subject, the intellectual subject, the intellect, and the intellectually cognized object. Really, if God is our Father, then he must be wiser than we are. Also, a strategy used by Marx in economics may be valid here also. He said that you may try to create the perfect system, so you fix one variable, and then you can fix another variable and so on. But make sure that fixing a new variable may require adjusting previous variables, similarly, because they may be dependent. Similarly, God may be perfect, but it does not mean that he has infinite attributes of infinite magnitude, page 13. God may have a finite number of attributes from which an optimal combination, which form an optimal combination. So God need not be omniscient, omnipotent, etc., but only have a vast knowledge, vast power, etc. Saint Bonaventure, 1221 to 1224, an Italian bishop, he used a version of this ontological argument more psychologically, less logically. Duns Scotus, 1265 or 1266 to 1308, a Scottish priest, used the ontological argument as an aid. My ontological proof, Joseph Beaton, author. I propose an ontological proof of God, or more generally of other existing things also. There is a logical universe of truth that is conditional, but there is also a logical universe of truth that is unconditional, since it has a self-evident facts or proofs. Moreover, it actually exists if any universe exists, since its truths apply to all real universes. By a real universe exists since there is someone that exists, namely the person who is carrying out the proof of some existence, so that logical universe also exists. Define God as a necessary existence, so he exists in the logical universe, since he needs only to be consistent to be possible. Now God is part of that logical universe, hence he too must exist. Indeed, God need not be absolutely necessary. It is sufficient if there is nothing in the universe that could cease his existence. I do not think anyone made this point before. Kant thinks that combining the ontological proof with the cosmological one makes no difference, but he may be mistaken. He defines space, time, and causality a priori. They may not exist in the world outside our mind, but this is a very important question. But I never heard anyone say that. But Einstein argued that space and time exist in the world. He defined them empirically using the relation of speed, space, and time, and the known speed of light. Also, Kant argued that the law of causality holds where time exists. So he would conclude that the law of causality exists in the world, except that we have a faculty of reason which may be outside time, and the law of causality may be broken there. So we can add that part of the logical world is in time and deterministic, and part is not. Alfred North Whitehead, add this. Okay. Page 14, okay. It is remarkable that Russell, 1872 to 1970, Hartshorne, 1897 to 2000, Quine, 1908 to 2000, were all doctoral students of Alfred North Whitehead, 1861 to 1947. All four of them are in the 20th century series called The Library of Living Philosophers, Volume 5, 1944, Volume 20, 1991, Volume 18, 1996, and Volume 3, 1941. Though Whitehead was the founder of the School of Process Philosophy and only Hartshorne developed that further, Russell and Quine, along with Carnap and Wittgenstein, became titans of the popular school of analytic philosophy. It's now about 51 minutes. I think the school of process philosophy, like the school of pragmatism, may have been inspired by the work in the science of physics, the former where objects are replaced by processes, since Maxwell predicated electromagnetic waves, and Einstein later predicated gravity waves. Einstein reduced matter and possibly also charges to waves, and the latter, where the truth of something depends on its usefulness, since Einstein argued that the goal of science is to make accurate predictions.